The gates leading to the dungeons began appearing suddenly in various locations. From within these portals, terrifying monsters poured out, spreading across the land. No one could stop these creatures, except for those in whom special magical powers had awakened. A group of renowned heroes known as the Golden Seekers emerged to face the threat. Among them were Ingolf von Dietz and Claudia Borgio, as well as Nathaniel Cavill, Iwaku Hideki, and Lee Roxy, who fought bravely against the monsters. In one of the devastated areas, a terrified man screamed for help as he collapsed to the ground, desperate to survive. Claudia urged her companions to hurry and assist the victims, but the overwhelming number of monsters made the situation nearly impossible to handle. At that moment, a monstrous creature lunged at one of the defenseless civilians, who was trying to shield his head. Before the beast could strike, it was suddenly blown away by a powerful hit, which caused a loud explosion. Another hero from the Golden Seekers, named Misato Kyoichiro, appeared on the scene. He asked those around him whether they were safe, assuring them that he would take care of the situation. Without hesitation, he charged at the monsters with full force, confronting a large number of them on his own. He wielded his extraordinary magical abilities with unmatched skill and power, astonishing those observing him from afar. One onlooker even remarked in disbelief that he was facing such a large horde alone. A girl from the team explained that he was using time magic, which enabled him to foresee the monsters' movements and predict their attacks. However, suspicions began to arise around him, with people wondering whether he was even human anymore, given the extent of his abilities. The battle raged on, reaching its climax when only one massive beast remained. Misato then declared that this would be the final one. After defeating the beast, he stated that with his powers, he would be able to ensure peace for the people. Just as he prepared to close the portal with his own hands, something unexpected occurred, causing him to flinch in shock and failed to complete his task. A sudden, powerful surprise attack threw him back into the portal, and a strange, ominous magical symbol appeared, leaving him stunned and unable to move as his teammates watched from the other side. Overcome by fear, Misato admitted he had never foreseen a future like this before, staring at the mysterious symbol in visible terror. In disbelief, he asked his comrades whether they were involved in this and why they would do something like that. One of his teammates stepped forward with a sly smile, mockingly suggesting it was amusing that he still hadn't figured out why he had ended up in such a dire state. Misato remained in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening, and questioned what his teammate meant. Two girls from the team then revealed that he was a monster, who had reached level 100 and possessed the power of time magic. All they had ever wanted was to earn money safely, but now they hinted that his strength had become a threat to them. One of the team members began harshly blaming Misato, accusing him of putting everyone in danger due to his insistence on helping others. Another spoke with sorrow, expressing that today would be the last time something like this would happen. The team then prepared to leave, abandoning Misato trapped within the magical barrier. One of them, with a mocking tone, told him they would meet again someday. Misato, overwhelmed with rage, tried to break free from the barrier, shouting and demanding that they let him out. He began recalling the painful memories of how they had betrayed and abandoned him, despite everything he had done for them as the leader of the Golden Seekers. In anguish, he questioned why they would turn on him, even though he had always tried to protect them without hesitation. His mind was consumed with confusion and fury as he continued to ask why this had happened. Moments later, Misato found himself alone, surrounded on all sides by a horde of terrifying monsters. Despite the dire situation, he continued fighting with all his strength, until he had a vision of the future that left him stunned. There was no chance of escape. It was then that he realized how hopeless his situation had become, and that there was no path out of this trap. Still, he tried using his foresight in a desperate attempt to find any possible means of survival, only to be struck with sorrow as he realized his future had come to an end. In the next moment, whatever hope he had left was shattered when it became clear that all escape routes had vanished. He smiled bitterly, accepting that there was no longer a future he could rely on. Even so, Misato gathered his courage and stood to face the monsters once more, fighting with the last remnants of his strength. He clenched his fist tightly, summoning every ounce of energy he still had for one final confrontation. With tremendous force, he charged toward the creatures, determined to bring them down despite being vastly outnumbered. In the end, however, his strength gave out. He dropped to his knees, his body covered in wounds, fully aware that he hadn't been able to change his fate despite all his efforts. With a look of despair and resignation, he came to accept that death was now inevitable. In a grim moment, he prepared to face his final end, as the monsters closed in from all directions. But he refused to die that way. He resolved to keep fighting to the very end. Misato made a decision. He would return to life stronger than ever, vowing that this would not be his final destiny. He swore that once he returned, he would reach the peak of his power and take revenge on all those who had betrayed him. Fueled by rage and despair, he pushed himself forward, determined to stay alive until the day of his vengeance arrived. He gathered the last of his energy to carry out his plan and exact retribution against those who had caused his suffering. With a scream filled with fury and pain, he declared he would never forget and would never stop until his vengeance was fulfilled. Then his spirit began to drift away, signaling the beginning of a new life. Misato opened his eyes in a new body, having been successfully reincarnated. He rose slowly, taking in his new appearance, still confused and trying to grasp what had happened. Walking over to a mirror in the room, he stared at his reflection and realized the reincarnation process had been completely successful. After a few moments of thought, he wondered whether he was in a hospital, puzzled by the strange machines around him. He began to question how many years had passed since his last memories, and whether an entire century had already gone by. Misato realized that he would never be able to fulfill his revenge if he failed to seize the opportunity before him now. As he examined his surroundings, something placed on the table in front of him caught his attention and stirred his curiosity. When he picked it up, he discovered it was a student ID card belonging to the original owner of the body he had awakened in. The card, he noted, had been issued around 20 years ago. What surprised him even more was that the card revealed the owner possessed a highly unusual trait called Void, an exceptionally rare ability. A sudden wave of laughter overtook Misato as a powerful sense of excitement overwhelmed him. This was an opportunity that could never be replaced. He recalled his past life, when his teammates had feared him because of his previous ability, Time, which had made him the strongest among them. The more his powers grew, the more their fear deepened. Yet, not even his foresight had ever revealed the true depth or potential of this new ability, Void, which he now possessed. He felt a twinge of pity for the original owner of this body, who, despite holding such a powerful gift, had never been able to make use of it. Misato reasoned that Void was undoubtedly the strongest trait of all, but one that no one in his previous life had ever wielded. Because of its rarity, no one had known how to train or develop it, which explained why its original user had remained at the lowest level, Level 1. He speculated that the young man might have even been mocked for having such an obscure and misunderstood ability, perhaps on more than one occasion. But with firm resolve, Misato decided he would make this boy's name known across the entire world as the strongest adventurer ever to live. Thanks to his former experience with Future Sight, he already knew exactly how to train the rare Void ability. Standing in the midst of an aura of rising power, Misato vowed to become the most powerful being with this newfound strength. He swore to himself that those who had betrayed him would suffer dearly and that his revenge would be unforgiving. At the same time, however, he understood that before he could exact revenge, he had to first develop his strength to its fullest. He lay back on the bed, calmly thinking about how to begin mastering the Void ability. He came to understand that the essence of Void was connected to a form of magic that governed nothingness, the absence of all things. The core of this power, he realized, lay in the ability to turn anything he imagined into tangible reality. He reflected that while everyone can easily imagine things, transforming those thoughts into reality was the true challenge. Fortunately, the body he now inhabited was suffering from serious injuries, which provided him with the perfect chance to test his new power. He decided to begin by attempting to heal his wounds and focused his mind on the complete recovery of his damaged body. With intense concentration, he imagined every cell in his body regenerating through the use of magic. To his astonishment, he watched as his injuries gradually began to heal, filling him with joy at the realization that it was working. Still, he recognized that the technique was primitive, and the rate of healing wasn't fast enough, as the internal damage had not fully recovered yet. However, he was certain that with repeated use and consistent practice, the power and effectiveness of the technique would steadily increase. As the level of the ability grew, so too would his capacity to turn any image he imagined into actual physical reality. Through this power, he would eventually be able to create and wield a wide variety of magical forms. In time, he would reach a stage where he could bring even the most intricate visions to life with absolute precision. With a confident smile, Misato reassured himself that he was now ready to pursue his goal. The young man opened his eyes, startled to see a doctor standing nearby, staring at him with a mix of confusion and joy at his awakening. The doctor rushed over and urged him not to move, warning that his injuries were extremely serious due to an attack by a monster. From the doctor's words, the young man quickly pieced together what had happened to the original owner of this body and began reflecting on his current situation. The doctor continued speaking, expressing astonishment at his recovery despite the severity of his wounds, and remarked that it was a miracle granted by the saint. The young man, puzzled, asked what the doctor meant by saint and what exactly he was referring to. The doctor's surprise deepened when he realized the patient knew nothing about the saint of the 5 holy saints, and the young man admitted that he also had no idea who this group was. Understanding the confusion, the doctor explained that it was natural to feel disoriented after just waking up and decided to run a full examination. He asked the young man to wait while he prepared the necessary tools. The doctor hurried out of the room, emphasizing that he must stay put until the examination was complete. In the meantime, the young man began pondering the 5 holy saints, wondering whether they were one of the powerful factions that had emerged over the past 20 years. He noticed a phone lying on the table and realized he needed to understand the current state of the world, as well as work on strengthening his power. He turned on the nearby television and found a special report about the monster invasion incident of the 7th category that occurred 2 decades earlier. His eyes widened in shock as the report named the one responsible for the incident, Misato Kyoichiro, the former leader of the Golden Seekers and wielder of the level 100 time ability. He was shaken by this revelation, recognizing himself as that very person from his previous life, and wondered why such accusations had been made against him. The report went on to claim that Misato had planned to take over the world by unleashing monsters, but the other members of the Golden Seekers had stopped him just in time. It further explained that those members had since become known as the 5 Holy Saints, after a fierce battle that resulted in Misato's disappearance and the successful purification of the dungeon. The young man was overcome with anger and pain as he watched his former companions celebrated as global heroes after their battle with him. The report concluded by stating that the 5 Holy Saints were still leading the world today, across various sectors. Standing at the window, he listened intently to the broadcast, trying to absorb everything he had just heard. Then, laughter burst from him, hysterical and sharp, driven by the rage and agony of betrayal. He felt a deep sense of treachery, realizing that his former allies had not only turned on him, but had also humiliated and degraded his honor. The memories of being sacrificed while the others went on to enjoy false glory and success haunted him. He was consumed with bitterness at the thought of those traitors now being revered as heroes across the globe. Resolving never to forgive what had been done to him, he swore that he would never let go of the pain they caused. Fueled by rage and determination, he vowed to send every one of them to hell in pursuit of vengeance. He took a deep breath, calming himself slightly after the intense wave of fury that had overtaken him. He realized he needed to be extremely cautious in his actions if he wanted to remain undetected. Grabbing the phone again, he thought about the importance of staying hidden until he was fully ready to strike. He then checked to see where the body's previous owner had been enrolled. A sly smile crept across his face when his suspicion proved correct. The academy attended by the body's former owner was headed by none other than Iwaku Hideki, one of the 5 holy saints. Clenching the phone tightly, he felt a surge of satisfaction. Learning the whereabouts of one of his enemies so soon after awakening felt like a stroke of incredible fortune. The young man sat in deep thought, reflecting on Iwaku's character, and quickly realizing that he was an extremely cautious individual. As he studied his own identification card, he compared his current level with Iwaku's, and understood that the gap between them was immense. Acknowledging that he couldn't accomplish anything while still at level 1, he resolved to focus first on increasing his strength and gathering information about Iwaku. With determination, he clenched his fist and declared confidently that Iwaku would become his first target once he was fully prepared. Weeks later, the young man was finally able to stand and move around without difficulty. The doctor was astonished by his swift recovery, openly expressing disbelief at how quickly he had healed. He wondered aloud if it was another miracle from the saint, but the young man calmly denied it. Internally, he affirmed that the recovery had nothing to do with divine intervention. It had been the result of his own power alone. He thanked the doctor for his care and bid him farewell, while the doctor advised him to take good care of himself moving forward. Stepping out into the city streets, the young man reflected on the basic preparations he had completed. He checked his identification card to confirm his current level and concluded that it was sufficient for now. With a confident smile, he decided the time had come to test his strength and headed toward a training dungeon. Along the way, he recalled what the doctor had once told him, that the original owner of the body he now inhabited had lost his entire family in a tragic accident. A wave of sadness came over him for the young man whose life he had taken over. Still, he recognized this loss as a form of freedom. No family meant no restrictions, giving him full control over his path. He used his phone to confirm the dungeon's location and verified that he had reached the correct destination. Standing at the gate of the dungeon, he double-checked the address to ensure it was the right place, ready to begin leveling up and refining his skills. He covered his face with a mask to conceal his identity and braced himself for the adventure ahead. Approaching the security guard at the entrance, he handed over his ID card. The guard reacted with surprise and quickly grabbed his arm to stop him, clearly confused about what he was doing. Calmly, the young man asked what the problem was. The guard, now irritated, informed him that his level was only 27, while the dungeon was restricted to those at level 30 and above. The guard continued protesting, stating that entering the dungeon alone at such a level would be suicidal. In response, the young man firmly grasped the guard's wrist to halt his objections. Holding up his ID once more, he confidently explained that he was a student at Tokisui Academy for Adventurer Training, and that he had the right to enter if he signed a waiver form. The guard hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly admitted that the young man was right, though he still seemed suspicious. A group of young adventurers nearby overheard the exchange and approached with mocking arrogance, advising him to know his place. They continued to mock him, saying he was just a beginner and ought to be more cautious. Choosing to ignore their jeers, the young man turned back to the guard and asked if all that remained was to sign the consent form. The young man began signing the consent form while the guard tried to stop him, urging him to wait a moment. Ignoring the guard's plea, he insisted there was no longer anything preventing him from entering. As he made his way toward the gate, he politely thanked the guard for his concern before quickly heading inside. Concerned, the guard called out to a group of nearby young men, asking them to follow the newcomer and keep an eye on him. The group was surprised by the request and questioned whether the guard truly believed that allowing someone of his level to enter alone was suicidal. One of them dismissed the idea with a sarcastic remark, refusing to bother with watching him, while another considered it a good opportunity. A third spoke aloud, saying that if no one was there to witness anything, then nothing unfortunate would be a problem. Another smirked and confidently stated that if something bad happened, it might actually be beneficial for them. As they moved to follow the young man, they continued mocking him, claiming he was just pretending to be strong and that he would need another 100 years to reach their level. The guard thanked them, apologizing for the inconvenience, and saw them off, hoping they would watch over the young man and keep him safe. The trio entered the dungeon and proceeded cautiously, preparing to carry out their task. One of them grinned maliciously, remarking that they should do what they always did, kill the target and blame the monsters. He added, still smiling, that thanks to gullible victims like this one, their wealth would only continue to grow. The three of them imagined with delight how their pockets would soon be filled with money after disposing of the young man. They moved quickly through the dungeon, walking with confidence toward their target. 10 minutes passed, and they were still searching without any sign of him. One of them stopped, exhausted, and complained that even though they had been walking straight ahead the whole time, they still hadn't caught up. Suddenly, one of them spotted something ahead and shouted a warning to the others. At last, they found the young man standing firmly, surrounded by a group of terrifying monsters. His eyes glowed with power as he prepared for battle. He launched a powerful attack using his magical energy, pushing the monsters away from him. A vibrant green energy surged in his hand, causing the three young men to stare in shock. With that surge, he unleashed a violent storm that shook the area and struck the surrounding monsters. Flames and energies spread in all directions, shattering the beasts and kicking up clouds of dust. Once the chaos settled, the young man stood victorious, leaving those observing him in utter disbelief. One of the trio was stunned that he had managed to defeat a level D monster on his own with such ease. But another noticed something even more significant and pointed to the ground in surprise. They all looked toward a sack filled with rare items that had fallen from the defeated beast. Excitedly, they began plotting to sell the rare loot, believing the profits could support them comfortably for 6 months. Meanwhile, the young man remained bent over the ground, seemingly unaware of the valuable items behind him. This led the three to foolishly assume they could simply take them without trouble. The three young men began plotting to kill the boy, assuming he still hadn't noticed their presence. One of them leapt into the air, launching an attack toward him while wearing a cunning grin. The leader of the group shouted a command, ordering the others to begin their assault and finish him off. They attacked from multiple directions using their magical abilities, aiming to eliminate him in a single blow. But the boy, who had been fully prepared, muttered in irritation about how bothersome they were. He turned sharply toward them, meeting their ambush with a piercing gaze, mocking their failed attempt, and declaring that he had known what they were planning from the start. Moving with incredible speed, he easily evaded their attacks and thought to himself that there would always be people who tried to steal from others, no matter the era. He continued dodging their strikes with effortless agility, completely unscathed. The trio was stunned by his skill and his uncanny ability to avoid every blow, questioning in disbelief how he was managing to do it. One of them assumed it must have been sheer luck and charged again with full force, determined to finish him. However, the boy reacted instantly, launching a counterattack. He dashed forward and landed a powerful punch, infused with magical energy, straight into the attacker's face. The blow hit with brutal force, sending the attacker crashing to the ground as he coughed up blood. He was flung violently backward, slamming into the dungeon wall with such force that part of it collapsed. The boy walked forward calmly, leaving the defeated attacker lying among the wreckage. Struggling to rise, the injured attacker threatened him angrily, calling him an insect. The two remaining men stood frozen in fear and disbelief, while the boy coldly warned them that he wouldn't show them any mercy. With rising fury, he declared that he would use them as a means to increase his strength, without hesitation. He ended by affirming that all of this was for the sake of his revenge. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, the magical gate remained open. One of Iwaku's subordinates, named Yuichi Tsuda, entered the dungeon after receiving word that a student had entered alone. Yuichi was shocked to find the three adventurers sprawled across the ground, completely motionless. He stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what had happened here. Elsewhere, the boy had returned home, reflecting on the events that took place in the Level D dungeon, where he had succeeded in leveling up and testing his void magic. He held up his student ID and noticed he had acquired a new spell called Information Concealment. A confident smile formed on his face as he considered the spell's benefits. It allowed him to hide his true level and erase any records of dungeon entry. Lying back on his bed, he relaxed and told himself that tomorrow would be his first day at the academy. Glancing at his phone, he noticed several unread messages from people demanding money and mocking him for lacking a special ability. He smirked after reading them, realizing that the body's former owner had been bullied and ridiculed for his weakness. The next morning, he made his way to the academy. Upon entering, he heard a girl's voice calling out to him by name, Kyosuke. A classmate of Kyosuke, a girl named Asahi Karin, greeted him warmly that morning, asking how he was doing after his release from the hospital. Kyosuke responded with a calm smile, assuring her that he was fine now. She continued speaking, expressing her relief and happiness that he was okay, explaining how worried she had been about him. As they spoke, three other students suddenly appeared. One of them loudly mocked Kyosuke, calling him the weakling with a pathetic ability who had miraculously survived. He continued taunting him as he approached with his two companions, saying that since they had to protect someone so weak, it was only fair they get compensated for it. The three moved in closer, wearing sly smiles, and demanded money from Kyosuke, claiming that one of them was in urgent need of cash. Kyosuke instantly remembered the humiliating messages he had received before and realized these were the very ones who had sent them. Karen quickly stepped in, trying to stop them, reminding them that Kyosuke had just been discharged from the hospital and didn't deserve their harassment. She clutched her bag nervously, visibly anxious, while Kyosuke silently observed the situation with growing anger. He then raised his hand to stop Karen from interfering and reassured her with a calm smile that he would be fine. One of the other two laughed mockingly at the sight, telling Kyosuke to stop pretending to be tough just because he was in front of a girl. Their leader stepped forward, ridiculing Kyosuke in a degrading tone, claiming that he was a worthless nobody who couldn't even use magic properly. But Kyosuke responded calmly and with full confidence, stating that it was they, not him, who needed to learn their place. Holding up his ID, he declared with conviction that he would make the name of the boy who once owned this body known across the world. Raising his hand above his head, he silently affirmed his inner vow that he always keeps his promises. The group's leader became furious at Kyosuke's words, glaring at him with intense hostility as he prepared to strike. He unleashed his magic in a fit of rage, aiming his attack at Kyosuke while shouting that he was speaking nonsense. Karen screamed in alarm, warning that using magic outside the dungeon was forbidden and against school rules. But the leader ignored her completely, yelling in fury that someone talentless like Kyosuke had no right to challenge him. He directed a massive fire-based spell straight at Kyosuke, releasing it with a violent shout. Kyosuke, however, remained perfectly calm. With a subtle movement of his hand, he effortlessly stopped the attack. He then launched a far stronger counterattack, redirecting the fire spell back at its caster. The collision triggered a powerful explosion, shaking the entire area. The other two boys were left stunned when they saw Kyosuke using the exact same magic their leader had unleashed. In utter shock, they wondered aloud when he had become capable of casting such a spell. The group's leader stood frozen, asking in disbelief what had just happened. Kyosuke looked at him coldly, his expression dripping with contempt, and asked mockingly if that was the best he could do. Burning with both anger and humiliation, the leader seemed ready to explode from sheer frustration. In a fit of rage, he ordered his two companions to stop standing around and attack Kyosuke immediately. Obeying the command, the two launched their own spells at Kyosuke, demanding to know whether this attack suited him better. Kyosuke stood firm, exuding calm and confidence, as a powerful magical aura began to form around him in preparation for his response. The three young men grew increasingly panicked and frightened, unable to comprehend how many magical traits Kyosuke could actually wield. It all felt completely unnatural to them. Kyosuke stared at them with a cold gaze and asked mockingly if they were satisfied now with what they had seen. Calmly raising his hand, he announced that it was now his turn to respond. As he stepped toward them, he assured them they needn't worry. He wouldn't go as far as killing them. Terrified, they began screaming for help after witnessing the overwhelming power Kyosuke possessed. Approaching the group's leader, Kyosuke reminded him of a moment when he had once asked for his help, and in a firm tone, questioned how he had responded at that time. Without waiting for an answer, Kyosuke lunged forward and grabbed the leader's face, causing the latter to tremble in terror. He intensified his grip, hurling the same insult the leader had once used, calling him nothing more than an insect. With crushing strength, he slammed him to the ground, telling him that people like him only ever repeat the same pathetic lines. Looking down at him with icy indifference, Kyosuke made it clear that no excuse would stop his fist from delivering this blow. Then his fist came crashing down with tremendous force, landing a brutal strike on the group leader. The impact sent him flying backward, propelled with immense power. He landed hard, writhing in pain, blood spilling from his mouth. The attack triggered a massive explosion, amplifying the damage dealt to his body. In the end, the leader collapsed completely unconscious from the devastating blow. Karen watched the entire scene in shock, barely able to whisper Kyosuke's name as she struggled to process what she had witnessed. As the other two rushed to their fallen comrade's side, Kyosuke told himself with unwavering confidence that, from this moment on, he would never allow anyone to belittle him again. With a confident smile, he vowed to continue his journey toward becoming the strongest adventurer of all. The three students quickly apologized, filled with regret as they scrambled to flee the area, repeatedly assuring him how sorry they were. They continued shouting their apologies as they ran, clearly shaken and remorseful. While fleeing, their leader growled in frustration and anger over how drastically Kyosuke had changed since leaving the hospital. Kyosuke let out an indifferent sigh, remarking that, in the end, those boys were never as strong as they claimed to be. He then strolled through the academy corridors with Karen by his side, as students all around turned to watch them with curiosity and amazement. Noticing the many eyes fixed on him, Kyosuke quietly wondered whether he might have gone too far this time in drawing attention. Just as he and Karen were about to leave the area, someone called out, asking him to wait for a moment. Kyosuke turned toward the voice and saw a young man who appeared to be older than him. The newcomer asked if he was really Asahi Ho. Kyosuke looked at him calmly, yet with a trace of irritation, thinking that this guy was probably one of the senior students, and wondering what he could possibly want from him now. Weighing his options, Kyosuke briefly considered ignoring the man and walking away, but instead politely replied that he was sorry, as he was currently busy and had to head to class. However, the man gently stopped him and admitted he hadn't introduced himself yet. He then clearly stated his name, Yuichi Tsudai, and announced that he was the leader of a group called Biting the Cat. Karen looked on in surprise when she heard the name of the group, Biting the Cat. Kyosuke was taken aback when he realized that this was the very group led by Yuichi, the same one originally founded by the academy's director, Iwaku. Yuichi insisted once again, asking Kyosuke if he could spare him a moment of his time. With a calm smile, Yuichi reassured him that it wouldn't take long at all. Kyosuke responded with a cold smile, saying that there was no escaping it if that was the case. Once they entered the room, Yuichi immediately asked if Kyosuke was the one who had defeated the adventurers in the Level D dungeon the night before. Kyosuke answered with extreme composure, pretending not to know what Yuichi was referring to. Yet deep inside, Kyosuke felt uneasy. He had made sure that information was hidden, and he now wondered how Yuichi had managed to uncover it. Yuichi explained that he had received a report about a student entering the dungeon, and had gone to verify it personally. He added that inside the dungeon, he had found well-known criminals who targeted novice adventurers, and that they had been defeated. Yuichi continued by saying that, earlier that same morning, Kyosuke had been seen using multi-trait magic as well, which had only fueled his suspicions. Kyosuke smiled inwardly, reassured that Yuichi still didn't know the exact nature of the magic he possessed. Yuichi repeated his question, this time more sternly, demanding to know if Kyosuke had truly been the one to defeat them. Kyosuke calmly responded again, pretending he couldn't recall. explaining that he had been ambushed earlier that day and couldn't remember the details well. He quietly pulled out his student ID and clearly stated that he was still at level 1, so it would have been impossible for him to accomplish such a feat. Yuichi was shocked and confused upon seeing the ID, which confirmed that Kyosuke was indeed at level 1 and possessed the Void trait. Internally, Kyosuke smirked, amused that someone like Yuichi had dared to waste his valuable time like this. Annoyed, Yuichi quickly apologized for calling him in without valid reason. As he exited the room, Yuichi advised Kyosuke not to act in ways that might draw suspicion, since it only created more work for him. Kyosuke silently watched him walk away, observing him with quiet interest. With a confident grin, Kyosuke told himself that Yuichi might prove very useful to him in the future. Meanwhile, Yuichi walked away pondering how he might eventually gain control over Kyosuke and bring him under his command. Kyosuke sensed that now might be the perfect time to begin testing his new magical abilities, perhaps even on Yuichi himself. Later on, Yuichi submitted a report to the Academy Director regarding the events that took place the previous night in the Level D dungeon. Director Iwaku, seated calmly at his desk, remarked that this situation was unlike Yuichi, and he hadn't expected such errors from him. He warned Yuichi firmly that he needed to be far more cautious in selecting the people involved in his plans. Yuichi apologized sincerely and assured him that he would resolve the situation quickly. Iwaku then stated sternly that if word got out about Yuichi's involvement in the attacks on beginner adventurers, the backlash wouldn't fall on Yuichi alone, but on him as well. Yuichi was filled with fear and shock when Iwaku grabbed his face harshly, warning him never to make such a mistake again. Iwaku gripped Yuichi's face tightly, warning him that if anything went wrong, he wouldn't hesitate to abandon him without a second thought. Yuichi, tense and frightened, assured the director that he fully understood what was being said. Still, a wave of frustration and anger washed over him as he silently questioned why he had ended up entangled in all of this. He bitterly wished he had seen it coming. He recalled with regret that had he known earlier, he would have at least taken more money from the individuals involved in the incident. Iwaku continued, pointing out that, despite everything, there was still something Yuichi clearly hadn't grasped. Nervously, Yuichi asked what he meant. Iwaku explained, referencing Yuichi's own report, that the student who defeated the adventurers must have been, at minimum, a third year. He gestured to the data screen in front of him, noting that no third-year student had entered the dungeon the night before. From this, Iwaku concluded that the adventurers must have been defeated by someone else, and that Yuichi was attempting to cover up that truth. He stated with confidence that this explanation made far more sense to him than believing one of his students had single-handedly overpowered known adventurer hunters. Yuichi, anxious and uncertain, tried to respond but struggled to find the right words. Iwaku cut him off, reaffirming his theory, unless of course something highly unusual had occurred. At that moment, Yuichi recalled Kyosuke's student ID, which displayed the rare trait Void, and he wondered if that was the unusual factor Iwaku had meant. He carefully asked the director whether a rare trait could have caused such an outcome. Iwaku admitted that the presence of a rare ability was indeed a possibility. Suddenly, Yuichi smiled and requested that the director allow him to handle the matter personally from now on. Meanwhile, Kyosuke walked alongside Karen, smiling to himself as he considered how he could turn Yuichi to his advantage. With a quiet, confident grin, Kyosuke resolved inwardly that he would resolve this situation swiftly and definitively.